It is now being called a public health emergency.
Officials confirm more than 150 measles cases.
But you take this little beautiful baby and you pump. I mean, it looks just like it's meant for a horse, not for a child.
We were surprised to hear that measles infected at least 19 people who visited Disney theme parks.
The country had one of the highest rates of measles outbreaks in Europe.
Do you consent? Are you informed?
Measles is highly contagious and can lead to serious complications. 2 children are now hospitalized and 1 adult in this latest outbreak. Parents who have vaccinated their kids tell me they're glad they did.
And people generally tout the work of people like Andrew Wakefield.
1998, Dr. Andrew Wakefield published a report suggesting that there was a link between the MMR vaccine and autism.
When the claims first came out, initially it was taken very seriously, and then when the report was actually looked into in more detail, it was obviously soon discredited.
These children were investigated in a poorly constructed research study. People have tried to replicate this work, and there have now been several studies that have refuted and shown that there is no causal link between MMR and autism.
That whole study has been completely debunked, but it planted the seed of doubt in parents' minds.
That portraying a particular message that vaccines are bad for you, vaccines are a conspiracy theory from Big Pharma.
I think at the moment there's a lot of misinformation around about the need for vaccination.
I'm concerned about how many vaccines we have to give our children at once.
When it comes to medicine for your children, vaccinations,
yes.
You're totally against this.
Yeah, I am. I actually believe childhood disease is quite important to experience to build the child's immunity.
I think there are too many and they're given too early.
We believe that God gave us the ability to heal from within. We're willing to risk a childhood illness over risking something more serious like autism.
I reject the premise that I have a moral obligation to put my child's health at risk for the sake of someone else's child.
As a professional nurse, we have to respect parents' wishes. However, we also would like to empower them to maybe change their mind and consider vaccinating not only for the benefit of their child, but also for the community.
In this country, as a nurse, if I portray a anti-vaccination message, that's my own free will to be able to do that. Whereas if in Australia, I could lose my registration. So there's such a strong feeling in Australia that we should keep vaccinating our children.
You have to have, all these kids have to have this amount of shots or this, or you can't go to school. Not anti, I'm for freedom of choice. You have to have, the parents have to be the ones to decide.
It's twice as many as anywhere else in 30 countries in the Western world. But we give twice as many shots as any of those countries. Why is that?
Autism has become an epidemic. I am totally in favor of vaccines, but I want smaller doses over a longer period of time. But you take this little beautiful baby and you pump. I mean, it looks just like it's meant for a horse, not for a child. 2 years old, 2.5 years old, a child, a beautiful child, went to have the vaccine. A week later, got a tremendous fever, got very, very sick, now is autistic.
There's a lot of information about things that are happening with the CDC, the pharmaceutical companies. There's a lot of things that are not said. And I want to know the truth, and I'm not anti-vaccine. I want safe vaccines. Some people can't get a certain type of shot, and they can die from it.
Vaccinations are historically safe. If a child is unwell on the day of vaccination, then the vaccination shouldn't take place. If parents are living in communities where they're not vaccinating and we're not getting the herd immunity effect, then we're going to have an outbreak. So with the herd immunity, we don't expect everybody to be vaccinated, but if you can get to a certain very high percentage of people vaccinated, then the chance of an outbreak occurring is that much lower.
That's a point to ensure that we do vaccinate more people to protect these people that can't initiate a response, not to have less vaccine.
It's especially dangerous for children. Last year, the country had one of the highest rates of measles outbreaks in Europe.
I saw a kid walk in with meningococcemia, which I haven't seen in decades. He had all 4 limbs cut off. They had to be amputated because it was all dead tissue. You forget how bad things were before we had vaccines.
Because we have had less and less outbreaks in this country, it almost seems that parents' attitudes are like, well, if these illnesses aren't around, we don't need to vaccinate them anymore.
restricting access to services such as schools, such as nurseries, for those who have not been vaccinated, I think would be a good move. We're very keen to remove things like peanut butter from nurseries, which has a detrimental risk to some children.
Lawmakers heard arguments on a proposed bill that would ban measles vaccine exemptions for philosophical reasons.
Do you consent? No! Are you informed?
Yes! Hundreds rallied to preserve their right not to vaccinate their children.
This may lead to enclaves of people. It's a very complex issue.
And in the global perspective, how can they possibly prove that a vaccination has caused sudden infant death, autism, or other things? There are so many other factors that would be considered, and it almost feels a bit scare tactics. Don't confuse what you've read on the internet with my nursing professional background or a medical professional background.
It's vaccinations that help beat infectious diseases. The question is, do we want to return to a world where we're vulnerable to them again?
Girl, you have no faith in medicine. Oh, girl, you have no faith in medicine. I see the medicine. You see the medicine. Oh, girl, is there a way to find a cure for this implanted? Why should we fight? We're all friends, you and I. Remember, let's get high.